I'm Gareth Ward. I'm the editor of a magazine in the UK called Print Business. I've been hanging around the graphic arts and the printing industry for more years than I care to remember. Hasn't quite cost me my hair yet. But I've been around. I've been to numerous Drupers, and this is the first one in 2020 that I won't be able to attend for a good few years. But in 2012, one of the highlights of Drupal for me and for many other people was the appearance of Scodix and the wonderful effects that they could produce on what looked like a standard printing machine. And when we could grab samples, they were great. 2016, Scodix came back. We grabbed some more samples. I think it was a terrific year for Scodix. I believe that they took more orders and achieved far more interest than had been anticipated at the event. And it's probably been good times for them. They introduced the B1 machine for the first time. So Nigel, could you introduce yourself and tell us what's been happening since 2016?
Yeah, sure. It would be my pleasure. So thanks for the opportunity, first of all, Gareth, and appreciate the nice introduction of the recent history of Scodix. So first of all, my name is Nigel Tracy. I head up the packaging division within Scodix. Packaging is something which Scodix actually strategically identified even way back prior to that, sort of, I think even in the sort of Drupal 2012, 2013, they had customers which were saying, you know what, that nice little machine you have, that S series, as those first machines were called, we need one of those, but bigger and faster. And we need to make these carton things with it. So I think that's how it all started. If we go back and listen to the co-founders, Kobe and Ellie, back in those sort of very, very early days. Scodix is a company which is a little over 10 years old. We've done some very good things, I think, since that sort of early Drupal 12 time, developing the next technology of B2 format, the range we call today Ultra. And then at the next Drupal 16, where the company really took off and really made a big step, in introducing things like Scodix E106, which is the product I work with in the packaging domain. I think during that period, what has been the mainstay of Scodix really has been the release of that Scodix Ultra, several iterations of that press which have come out. The most recent variation of that are now separating those two machines to what we call Scodix 101 and Scodix 202. In a couple of words, what that means is we develop the machine better and better all the time. And then at a certain point, some people said, you know what, I don't need all of those features. Can I not have something, a little bit more entry level, if we want to use that word, yeah? And so we said, you know what, let's separate that. Let's have 101, let's have a 202. And that's what we've been doing over that last sort of 18 months. Going back actually to that Drupal 16 period, that 4 years ago now, we had just launched Scodix Foil. We developed a dedicated foil module. We launched that actually in, I think it was November 15, just prior to the Drupal release. And of course, when we took that to Drupal, things just exploded.
Yeah, that was terrific.
Yeah, that was the main thing. You were looking, I think you mentioned earlier about the photographs we did. We had a professional photographer. We took people's picture and then we digitized that and then we printed that in foil. And everybody remembers that.
I've still got one somewhere.
You still got one somewhere. You said you had Deb's hidden it somewhere in your recent move.
It's been conveniently lost, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
Not that the quality wasn't up to it. It was just the subject matter.
Absolutely, exactly. Well, you're spotting it, as you said, you're spotting your COVID-19 hairstyle, and so am I, of course. Yeah. So that's fine. So I think during that period we had a strong focus on getting the Ultra out there, getting it really, really robust and stable. And what's really nice to talk about now, I mean, my background is purely packaging. I've been, 33, 34 years in packaging, started out my studies at the London College of Printing and the Elephant and Castle in London. Looking at this now, I'm thinking digital, small machines, photocopiers. I'm looking at it from a very narrow-minded engineering. I've got gears running around in my head somewhere, not brains. But actually now we have customers which are printing, even on our Ultra technology, they're printing 1.5 million sheets a year.
Whoa.
100,000, 120, even 150,000 sheets a month. So they're running 2-shift, 3-shift operation. We're going to talk a little bit later on about Web2Print and Web2Pack, but those presses are running as we speak now in Web2Print environments 24/7, multiple presses. And that's a big, big step to take digital to that level where people can rely on it, can depend on it, and every day produce tens of thousands of sheets. That's a big step. And it wasn't easy for a small little company like Scodix to do. And if it's the one thing I look back on and say, what are the proud moments of Scodix? I think it's that stability that's been achieved. It's development of all the new features and functionality that we all like to talk about and roll out. What we call the not Drupal news. What are you not launching at Drupal in a few weeks' time? We should be packing our bags now, I think, right? Shouldn't we? Choosing the shoes which don't hurt us when we're walking around.
Pretty well.
Yeah, exactly. So we would be there on the 16th of June, I suppose. Yeah, but obviously things have changed and things have moved forward. So a lot of progress on that. I think that's been particularly important. There's been a big, strong development in packaging, which we're going to come to as well in the discussion, not only on the Scodix E106, which is our dedicated packaging press, but also on customers wanting to, I use this expression, a digital toe in the water. They want to put a toe in the water and test what it's all about. Maybe they're coming from a purely analog perspective. Maybe they want to they're coming from commercial print and they want to put a toe in the water of packaging. Maybe they're already in packaging and they want to test the water of digital. So why would you think about doing that? There's two ways we can look at that. And that's a lot of my discussions these days with customers and advising customers how they can do that. My background has been very much in finishing solutions coming from companies like Bobst, many years in those companies. So I have a good base knowledge in those processes. And it's really how and where can we fit digital into that? Where can we make it worthwhile, relevant? We'll always talk about break-even points and ROIs. And there's two sides to the story. There's the replacement side. What can I do, which I'm doing today, and switch it to digital? And then what are the new things? And we can't just focus on one or the other. I always have this simple analogy I use and I talk to customers about, the cherries and the cake. If we can only talk about cherries and I've got no cake to talk about underneath, it kind of doesn't make sense, So I need a cake underneath, and then all the digital things can be the cherries on top of that. And you've got to get that balance right. So it's quite a difficult path to navigate. And I think Scodix has done that tremendously well during that interim period from previous Drupal up to where we are right now.
Because the nature of packaging and what people are buying, and particularly in this pandemic period, the way that people buy is changing because you can't get to the shops.
That's correct.
You've got a younger generation who have been brought up. They don't think of the internet as something new. It's something that's always been there, which is a bit, takes a bit of head getting around that. It does. That's always been there. So they have different relationships with the things that they buy. I mean, is this something that Scodix has noticed? Is this something that is driving the adoption of digitally produced packaging, and particularly in the carton space, I guess?
Yeah, I think so, because obviously anything we talk about, in the time that we're in now, in a post-pandemic scenario, it has changed fundamentally supply chain, purchasing habits, and not just purchasing habits of us as consumers, but also how the brands are purchasing from their supply chain, their folding carton converters. I was talking to one of our customers in the US 3 weeks ago, and they described a scenario where they're getting the same amount of orders, which is great. It's good. They're in a solid, stable packaging environment, but the chaos of how they're receiving those orders is really hard for them to handle. They'll get an order on Monday. The same brand will come back with a different order on Tuesday, and then the same brand will come back with a third order on Wednesday. And then on Thursday, they'll say, well, the one on Wednesday I need before the one I placed on Monday. And then on Friday, they'll say, well, you know what? I need more of the order from Wednesday, but less of the order from Tuesday. And it is just fluid. It is just constantly changing because they're reacting, because we're reacting as consumers. I'm purchasing things probably just like you, Gareth, where I would have nipped out to a shop and picked up an item,
Yep.
and I'm ordering it online.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Zalando, Amazon, whoever that mechanism is in that sense, is changing that. And we all know as well, when we order things like that, the packaging experience has to be changed as well. So I now need primary packaging, which is how I'm purchasing the product in store or out of store. I need secondary packaging because now it has to be shipped to my home address, safe, secure. It has to be perhaps anonymous because we don't want people to steal that on the doorstep. But equally, I've now got to get into that easily. And I now want my product unboxing experience. As a brand owner, I want you to experience that as a consumer. And we all remember those famous pages. I think I had it highlighted in Steve Jobs' book, those days with Jonathan Ives when they have an unboxing room, actually in Apple. And I've been very lucky enough to actually visit the unboxing room. The unboxing room is a room which is about, I don't know, twice the size of a normal living room, something like this. It has certain acoustics around it. And when they pick up that box, do you remember the vacuum sound the very first time you open that? That was what it's all about. That is one of the chapters in one of the famous Steve Jobs books. And that's what's created, or partly what's driven, the unboxing culture. It's what's driven the packaging experience. And we're seeing that trickle down now because as a brand owner, I want to market to you as a consumer. And if I can't market to you in store, well, I need to market to you somehow. And the package, of course, is the primary way I'm going to do that. We're watching TV differently. We're perhaps watching more online. We've probably watched a lot of Netflix in the last few weeks.
Oh, yes.
I'm sure during Netflix you didn't see a whole host of adverts. So that in itself changes how a brand communicates with us. So all of a sudden, the package is becoming center stage of that whole discussion and story. So now the package complexity really, really must go up. And by the way, I'm a brand owner. I want to order less of these things, and I want to pay less. So I want to pay less, have higher complexity, and I want to order less of them as well. And by the way, I don't want my hands to be tied together, so I'm committed to ordering 2 billion of these things a year. I want to chop and change according to my market. And if what we've learned in the last 8 weeks is anything, it is that markets are evolving faster than ever. So whatever campaign they thought about a year ago probably is thrown out the window, and there's a new one which was dreamt up last week. And the packaging design briefs now, all the ones that I see with brand owners, all are involving how the consumer interacts with that package. And think about it from our perspective. We know from the UK at least, there's packaging. You hear that term, packaging rage? I'm sure you've heard of that, Gareth, when people
I've suffered from it. Yeah.
They get frustrated. I mean, the SD card used to be the great example when you would try and open an SD card in the blister pack, sealed around, security device. And of course now that's gone. And the SD card's in a very nice little carton display, but it's got hot foil on it, a little bit of embossed hot foil.
Yeah,
that's a little change. Yeah. So those little changes are coming about as well. So there is absolutely more enhancement driven by that fact. The second aspect of that is the fact that as well, all of a sudden now we want to produce smaller quantities. And maybe in 1 year, we want to produce still 100,000, 300,000 packs. But of course, now what we're simply doing is we're just saying that the job lots are less. The total quantity in a year, my analogy is the cake again. The cake's the same size, but I'm just cutting it into smaller pieces. Great example, and I'm not the world's best advocate for that, is hair coloration. Hair coloration products, if I think back 20 years ago, there was probably 3 key brands, 10 colors, and that was your lot. Today, there is probably still 3 key brands, but under those brands, there is probably 10 sub-brands. Everyone has an ecologically friendly product, a budget product, a luxury product, and a million colors. You know what? I don't know if there's much more hair coloration sold, but that cake is a similar size and it's just cut a lot more thinly.
Yeah. And you've got an image that it relates to the person who might be buying it, and whether they're younger or older.
Absolutely. Yeah. So a lot of that has changed in packaging, and more changes to come. We've been hearing, job lots getting smaller, and they have, and they are, and it will only continue to do so. Is it halving every day, every week? Of course it isn't. It's a continual degradation, but it's also the reactivity as well. The fact that brands do want to have a greater flexibility in how they can call off those orders. That last example I heard from the US customer a few weeks ago, they need to be able to do that in order to serve their market, which just changed overnight. They need a supply chain that can react to that. And actually, the second I add enhancement into folding cartons, that's quite a bit of a nightmare, because my printing processes, even if they're analog, they're pretty efficient. I can set up an offset press in 20 minutes. I can have very low waste volumes, but I still need to produce a certain quantity to be efficient. Folding and gluing, die cutting, huge efficiency evolution over the last 10, 15 years. But in the enhancement side, really, we are talking about almost artisan, what I describe as black art processes. If you walk into a folding carton company, you see the nice, shiny offset machines at the front, then you see the die cutters, and then you see the folder gluers. And then we walk into a kind of museum somewhere out the back where we see all these processes with a little grey-haired gentleman bent over them setting something up for 4 hours. And that's where we come in at Scodix, because we can do that in 4 minutes with a 16-year-old guy, which we trained 2 weeks ago. And that, I think, is one of the beauties of this. When I did some interviews with some of our customers recently about what were the sort of main things that they were enjoying in packaging about using Scodix technology. And some of them were simple things like ramp up, learning curve, going from training to quality production in very, very short periods, not having a several-year learning curve. I always say in digital, that digital is great at making complex things simple. So in folding carton, if I take design A or design B, I've got A, which is simple. And if I show that to someone in the enhancement stage, they will say, well, that's a 2-hour setup. And we need a foil like this and a varnish like this and so on. And we can manage that. Now I look at B, which is maybe high-end cosmetics. Maybe it's a very expensive product going inside it, but it's multiple passes, multiple registrations. All of a sudden, this guy at the back scratching his head and saying, well, it could be 4 hours. It might even be 6. I'm not really sure. Let's say 8. In the end, it's either 12 or it could be 4. So from a costing point of view, that's a nightmare.
Well, from a scheduling point of view as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And also now, there's probably only one person in the company that knows how to run that in that particular way. So the fact that our customers have been able to train people up, over a period of time, switch somebody over and say, you know what, as long as the file's good, as long as we've got good guys in pre-press and we can get good files to that press, it's a simple process. It's stable and we know what to do with it. Even if we're adding very complex multiple processes of Scodix Sense on top of Scodix Foil, and even adding combinations of those together, because I know you know our processes very well, and at Scodix we always talk about 9 applications. I always like to think of that as 9 times 9, because in reality, I can add any number of those together on a single package.
Yeah.
And it's that which is really smart and really intelligent. We have an application we call Cast and Cure. It's a kind of holographic effect. And if we add that, for example, on top of foil, in a single pass, we can add Sense and Foil together on a carton, so it's still efficient and still unique. We can do some really, really wonderful things. And, remember, this is one machine with one operator. So that actually is, in my opinion, it's really enabling a higher degree of complexity, and it's simplifying those complex jobs, which folding carton converters, they would either shy away from, have difficulty doing, be challenged to do the costings for. There would be headaches, let's be honest. We can simplify those headaches, I would put it that way.
And then at the other end, getting those jobs in, where does we know about Web2Print,
right?
That's been around for a few years, and Scodix has been part of that revolution. Particularly, one of the most recent ones in the UK has gone into an online
That's right.
shop and is doing enhancements for book covers and business cards, obviously.
Yes.
So, is packaging now catching up with this? And obviously, packaging, you've described the complexity that may be in there. Then there's the complexity of the layouts and the formats and ganging those up on sheets and all the other bits and pieces, which scares the bejesus out of me. And I'm glad I'm not a programmer trying to work that out.
Yes.
But is that coming through? Are you seeing that starting to happen? And where does Scodix fit into that? Can you supply that software to do that, or are you integrating with that in some way?
Yeah, I mean, we were very lucky at Scodix that in those early days you spoke about, Drupal 2012, that we had very relevant web-to-print industry companies which were leaders. I can use the names Vistaprint that we partnered with from day one, to be quite honest. And it enabled us to, I would say, master that process. And I don't use that term often, I'll be honest. I think it's a little overused. But we have become masters of that web-to-print process by having now, 8 years experience in it, by having in the original days customized machines, customized hardware with customized software, working with those industry leaders. That's led us to today, where we have standard platforms, what we call Scodix Studio, which allows us to go from a standard Scodix product, which a customer can integrate with, to semi and even fully customized, where we can integrate with a customer's workflow and platform itself. We do all of that on our web-to-print business. These are large companies, multiple Scodix presses running 24/7, millions of sheets every year. So that's our daily bread and butter. We know how to do that. And now, how does that translate into the packaging world? And that's something I've been working on myself over the last year or so. And it's really interesting to see that the term Web2Pack, which I think has been kicked around the industry for some time, but is taking, it is taking some time to develop. It's not obvious. There are some key players out there which are leading that. I would say they are leading the way in that, and we're working with many of those. Again, we spoke about Vistaprint, and Vistaprint, of course, set up a division, or they acquired PixArt Printing, and within PixArt, they set up a dedicated area to work on that Web2Pack platform. And they've been doing that now for 3 years with Scodix Ultra technology. Great learning for both companies, and we've continued to develop that sort of further on from there. We've actually now taken that a stage further, because we now have customers which are saying to us, well, that's great in the world of packaging, but we're into gifting. Our customers are asking, can they do that with products like chocolate, high-end foods? And of course, we would say, well, why not? Why couldn't they? And then they'll remind us, of course, that we need low migration, food safe polymers, which is not an obvious one, not so easy to do. But fortunately, we went down that road with the Scodix E106, the packaging press, and all the polymers and consumables for that press are food safe. We achieved the Swiss ordinance with that several years ago. So now what we've done, or we're in the process right now, is rolling that out for the Scodix Ultra range. And that means now that customers will be able to take advantage of that. If they're in a Web2Pack scenario and it is a food-related product, then to use a new type of polymer from us for that press with full Swiss ordinance for secondary contact food packaging. And they'll have the full certification and confidence in order to be able to do that. That actually is something we would have been rolling out in a couple of weeks' time in Dusseldorf. Of course, we're not. So, we can announce that and we can say that here. We've got customers which are already starting to work with that. We're doing testing with major European chocolate brands, where we've got particular projects going at the moment, which I think are going to be very exciting to see. Probably, I would think after the summer when we'll sort of see that hitting the shelves. But it's a very interesting concept that we're seeing quite common. We're seeing a scenario. I remember actually 3 years ago receiving an espresso coffee tube, the capsule tube. So we order these things in 5s and 10s, but on my doorstep, I received a single tube. And I was a little bit puzzled because I hadn't ordered any coffee. And I know the Nespresso sites very well because every single Nespresso capsule is produced at 3 sites, and I live in the triangle around all of them here in Switzerland. So very automated lines. The capsules are produced. They go into the actual carton tube itself, and they then go into the outer box, which is the corrugated beef loop box, which arrives on your doorstep. Yet I received one of them here, and it had my name printed on it. How? What did they do? Really simple. They have a fulfillment company which takes those outer boxes of 10s, undoes them, prints a sleeve which slips around the outside of the standard and they printed my name on it. And lo and behold, I'm getting my own personalized Nespresso because why? I'd been a member for 10 years and they were grateful of that. And the sleeving concept is something we're seeing more and more of. The chocolate project we're working on now with another Swiss brand, a great concept of that. Standard chocolate box produced in the hundreds of thousands, and they want to go down the gifting route. They want to go down the corporate gifting route as well. So it's a B2B model, not only B2C. And they'll do that through sleeving. So it'll be a German company producing that, Scodix technology, Scodix food safe polymers to achieve it. And, we'll see that in the autumn period coming out. So that's going to be really interesting. But it does highlight that there are different models out there when we talk about Web2Pack. First of all, I see companies looking at this from two sides. There's the commercial printer, which says, packaging's interesting, not sure how to get into it. I know digital and I probably know web to print, so maybe that is a route, Web2Pack. That could be interesting. And then I've got the classic analog folding carton converters that are experts in packaging, but maybe are wondering, well, how do I start in the digital side? And maybe that is a way forward. So we're getting requests coming from both sides of that story, so it's quite an interesting discussion. And then, of course, well, who am I selling to? Is it a business card model where I'm selling direct B2C, or am I selling to brands? And actually, I think there's all of it, to be honest, because it's still so young, it is still being developed. And there's even hybrids around that, where we've had discussions with very large brand owners that simply say their process of their supply chain of ordering large quantities of cartons is very onerous. They've got to have multiple visits, multiple meetings, placing purchase orders, and that's fine if it's 100,000 boxes. But all of a sudden, they want to order 1,000 boxes because it's for a test marketing campaign. It's a new product they want to launch in Shanghai next month, and they just need 1,000 boxes. You know what? They've got to go through the same onerous process as ordering 100,000 boxes as they have for 1,000 boxes.
Yeah, makes no sense.
So why wouldn't a carton converter have its own portal set up, dedicated with predetermined pricing structure, so anyone from within that brand, anywhere around the world, could order a predefined quality, small quantities, and they would get them at a given fixed pricing, agreed pricing structure. So it's not only B2B, it may be dedicated B2B through specific portals. We certainly see that developing as well. And of course, then there can be the classic B2C model. I mean, who orders packaging? Actually, more people than you think. There is the eBay guys, which are repackaging goods.
Yeah.
There is return goods. There is, again, promotional aspects to that as well. There is this whole cottage industry. I remember back 6 years ago in different scenarios where there was a lady in a literally cottage industry. She was making perfumery in Belgium, and this was being sold in the UK, and she needed to order packaging. She needed 200 pieces. So when she went to her local folding carton company, they said, well, you know what? The minimum order quantity is probably 20,000 pieces. It might be an order of several thousand euros, which, was just way beyond her capabilities. She's grown into a nice sizable business. She's now got multiple products, multiple perfumes, and, it's probably grown into, a nice bit of packaging business for someone. But she had to start somewhere. Now, interestingly, one of our new customers, which we're installing a Scodix Ultra Press in a few weeks' time, will be in the south of Italy. And it's a company which has made quite a lot of noise in the industry. They have their traditional side of the business called Printgraph, and they've developed a number of years ago their Web2Pack platform, which is called Packly. Mm-hmm. Packly have been very successful selling all across Europe, multiple countries. If I remember correctly, many, many orders per day. They probably produce more orders in one day than most classic folding carton companies do in a month. And that's the nature of their business. Short run, super reactive. They want those orders to come in really quickly on very efficient workflows. The minute somebody starts touching them, they're probably going to lose money, so they need to be automated. They need to have platforms where everything is working together, as you said, composition, printing, digital printing processes, digital enhancement processes, and in their case, full digital finishing processes. So they're very, very ahead of that game in that sense. And we definitely see more and more companies investigating that opportunity. And when you look at it, does it matter where they are? Does it matter where any of us are in that sense? If I'm going to place an order for that product, do I mind where it really came from? Not really. As long as I get right quantity, right quality, right price within the time frame I've expected it to, I don't really mind where that was produced in that sense. So that changes that model a little bit as well. Did it give you some ideas, Gareth, for that?
Absolutely. So summing up, it's been promised, and it's really starting to start chugging down the track and pick up a bit of speed.
It is. Early days.
It's still early days, but the opportunity is there and worth exploring.
It is, and I do think the last 8 weeks is going to accelerate that process due to the changed buying habits.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The brands, as we say, they must market to us in some way. They need to. They need that competitive space in that sense. So we're going to see more of that. And Web2Pack can be one solution that can help them in that sense. The fact of how we're going to continue to buy as well, and our purchasing habits as consumers, I only see an acceleration in that. And I think Scodix is really well placed, not only because of our mastery in web to print, but also because of what we've been doing. We've probably been a bit lucky in that sense, that customers have been driving to that in the last 12 months. And we're now, just about ready to sort of pop the cork on that and get things moving. So I think perfect timing, really.
Yeah. But nothing to do with you then.
No, not at all. Just a bit of luck.
Nigel, thanks very much for your time. Thanks
what a pleasure
for explaining that. And I'm sure we're going to see a lot more of Scodix in this space in the weeks, months, and particularly in the lead up to Drupal when it does take place next April.
Will do.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Gareth. Thank you very much. Thank you.